Hello. So it is Sunday, October 22nd. I have for you today another weekly reading wrap up. I read quite a bit this past week. It was pretty varied too. So first up, we're starting off strong. I read Henry IV Part 1 by William Shakespeare, and this is a Norton Critical Edition. So that means that it's like the first third of it or so is the play, and then the last part of it is like critical essays and primary sources about it. This is a play that I did read for school. I read it for college in my Shakespeare class. I was an English major, and if you're an English major, you had to take a class that was just Shakespeare. You just read like it was like 8, maybe 10, somewhere between 6 and 10 Shakespeare plays. And I was thinking about this as I was reading this, as I was reading the play especially. For some reason, my head was like, why do I keep picturing Hal as Keanu Reeves? What is this? Why am I doing this? And then I remembered about My Own Private Idaho, which is a Gus Van Sant movie that is like loosely based off of Henry IV. And except for instead of being like, you know, a prince who goes and hangs out with like ruffians, he's the heir of a billionaire and he's a male prostitute. And so that's what was in my head a lot for this. Yeah, this isn't like one of my favorite Shakespeare plays or anything, but it is, you know, it's Shakespeare. It's well done. It's good. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Like I said, it's not my favorite, but I'm not a huge fan of his histories. Anyway, so there's that. After that, I read a book with a group of my 5th graders, and that is Top Secret by Reynolds, Gardiner, which is about this kid who, for a science project, he wants to solve human photosynthesis. He wants to create human photosynthesis. So he turns himself into a plant, and then the government gets involved. And it's okay. It's funny. It's just, I mean, it's very short. It's interesting. It's not anything I'd ever heard of before. I think I give it, again, 4 out of 5 stars. Not much to say about that one. After that, I read Funny Girl by Nick Hornby, which I actually very much enjoyed. So this is a historical fiction, takes place in England. It's about this girl who she really wants to be on TV. She wants to be like Lucille Ball. That's what she wants to be. She wants to be funny. She wants to be a comedian. And she ends up moving to London, and she eventually, like through, you know, all sorts of stuff, she does end up getting a part in a comedy show. And it's about her life, and it's about the lives of the people that she's working with, the writers, the other actors. I really enjoyed this one. I thought there was a lot of humanity in it, and it was funny at times. I didn't feel like that was its main thing, even though it is called Funny Girl and it is technically a comedy. What really stuck with me with this one was the humanity in it. The underlying like layer of how Bill and Tony were using this show to work out their own issues with each other was just, it just kept hurting me a little bit. I really enjoyed this. I thought it was fun. Nick Hornby is relatively well known, and I do think that this is not a bad one to start off with him. I know he's written quite a few books. I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. I thought it was really good. I thought it was really well done, and I would read more of his books. After that, I know we're going everywhere today. After this, though, it's almost straight pulpy horror. So we've got My Life as an Indian by J.W. Schultz, which is a autobiography of a man who, in the 1800s, he went and he stopped living with, you know, in regular American society, and he went to live with Native Americans, and he married a Native woman and all that stuff. And it is, for me, as somebody who grew up in North Dakota, it is very familiar reading books like this. I think that's kind of an American thing, is reading books like I feel like, maybe not so much anymore, but I guess when I was growing up, like, there are so many books about, like, you know, like living off the land and tanning buffalo hides and making making stuff out of animals and stuff like that. I don't know. Maybe it's not an American thing. Maybe it's just a rural thing. Maybe it's just a North Dakota thing. I don't know. But I feel a lot of this felt very familiar to me. And when it comes to what I was reading here and stuff that he was doing. And so that was kind of nice. You know, that felt kind of nice. Overall, though, it's not really my type of thing. It's not poorly written. It's not bad. I give it 3 out of 5 stars. It was just really fine. All right. Now we're getting we're getting into just pulpy horror now. First up, Remember Me 3, the last story by Christopher Pike. This is the final book in the Remember Me trilogy, and I'm not a huge fan of the Remember Me trilogy, I'm not gonna lie. It's a little too esoteric for me. I like Christopher Pike when he's setting people on fire. And in Remember Me, he's not setting very many people on fire. I think there is actually a fire at one point in the first one, maybe. But it's just too much like of the spiritual stuff that he just loves to shove in there. Too much of the just jelly jam. Okay, she's climbing on boxes. Just too much of that stuff and not enough of the fun horror-y stuff. I like stuff like Whisper of Death, which is kind of, I mean, that one's kind of spiritual, but somebody does blow up, so there's that. I like Chain Letter. I'm not a huge fan of the Remember Me books, but this is the final one. It was very meh. You know, I give it 2 out of 5 stars. I do like how Sherry Cooper is consistently characterized across all 3 books as somebody who is, for no good reason. I think the only reason why she was chosen to like become a wanderer is because once she helped the deaf girl in her school for a couple days. Other than that, she's like kind of terrible. Like she's kind of terrible, but not in a unique way. Just in the way that all like most teenage girls are kind of terrible, you know? Like teenagers are kind of terrible. That's just how it is, and she's not an exception. So yeah, I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. After that, I did read worse than Remember Me. I read Hounds of Dracula by Ken Johnson. This is about this. So in Romania, they dig up like what seems like to be like a cave that has a whole bunch of like vampire bodies in it. And when they see this, they're eventually like, oh, we gotta like kill all these vampires. So they like burn the bodies, stuff like that. But one of them and also a hound of Dracula, a dog who is a vampire, escape, and they go to America where the last living descendant of Dracula lives, and it was so goddamn bad. It was bad. It was boring. Somehow we have so many vampire dogs running around. It is the most boring shit I've ever read. It was terrible. It was poorly written. I cared nothing for any of the characters. There was just, oh my god. There was nothing here. Like, it was just, if you're looking for a pulpy horror to entertain you, this is not the one. Sometimes books are so bad they're good. Especially with pulpy horror, and we'll get to one of those too later on. There is one that is so bad it's because it's the last book I read this week. This one is not that. It's just bad. 1 out of 5 stars. After that, I read one of my college's literary journals. That is the Plainsongs, volume 34. I'm no longer in college. This was published in 2020, a year after I graduated. But my creative writing professor, the year before I graduated, I took a poetry class from him, and he was like, I'm going to put this poetry in for the Plainsong. I was like, sure. And so it's in here. So it's just a bunch of, you know, poems and essays and all that stuff. Where's mine? Let's find it. The fun thing about this is that he put it, yeah. So I think I gave it, what, 3? Yeah, whatever. All right, now we've got probably the best book I've read this, not probably, definitely the best book I read this past week. This one is honestly in the contender for my favorite books of the year. That is a short story collection, of a horror short story collection. It's all zombies, the Book of the Dead, which is edited by John Skipp and Craig Spector. They got a foreword by George Romero, and they've got stuff by Stephen King, John Lansdale, Richard Lehman, all the big names. It's awesome. These are all zombie stories, all of them. And after a while, they kind of started to get repetitive. Like the last 3 or so, I was kind of like, okay, let's wrap it up here. But so many of these are so good, so good. Let's talk about which ones are the best. Let's look in here. I mean, Richard Lehman's is gross and Lehman-y, and it's like, you can tell it's Lehman. You can tell it's Lehman. I'm also going to point out that if you do not want to read about a zombie gang rape, do not read this book. Home Delivery by Stephen King was fantastic. It was great. It's Stephen King. I feel like sometimes you don't ever really remember how good of a writer Stephen King actually is until you read him right after you read Richard Lehman, and you're like, oh yeah, right. Like you actually feel something for these characters. So that was good. The Sad Last Love at the Diner of the Damned, I enjoyed. This is the one with the zombie gang rape, if I'm remembering correctly, though. The Good Parts, that was a good one. Less Than Zombie, that was interesting. Okay, so I was not reading it reading this book expecting to find a zombie parody of Bret Easton Ellis's Less Than Zero. And as I was reading this, I was like, wow, this reads kind of like Bret Easton Ellis, especially when the main character has a random homosexual experience. And then I went back at the beginning and said, oh, it's called Less Than Zombie. And then the main character is literally named Brett, and I'm like, oh, yeah, this is just a Bret Easton Ellis parody. All right. Like Pavlov's Dogs, kind of interesting. It was a little bit confusing the way it switched around, but it was interesting. On the Far Side of the Cadillac Desert with Dead Folks. Fantastic story. Really, really enjoyed it. Dead Giveaway was kind of funny. I enjoyed it. But yeah, overall, it's a great set of stories. It's fantastic. They're all so goddamn good. Yeah, no, would recommend. If this is the best, like, anthology I've ever read in my entire life. One of the best horror short stories too, collections too, even like counting ones by like the same author. Like, it's so good. I give it 5 out of 5 stars. This might be one of my best favorite books of the year. It's fantastic. Then I read another one of the Remember Me books. I read Remember Me 2, which is just as bad as Remember Me 3. I realized I never actually explained what these are about. So the Remember Me series follows this girl, Sherry Cooper. The first book, Remember Me, and she dies at the beginning of the book. She dies, and she finds out that her death is being ruled as a suicide. She has to figure out what's happened to her, who killed her, what's going on. And while she's doing this, she becomes, like, she finds the spirit of a boy that she knew in high school that she kind of, that died recently. She kind of had a crush on him, and they're wanderers, which means that they're very spiritual, and they're here to bring about good change, and it's so bad. It's so goddamn bad. I give this one 2 out of 5 stars too. This is the second time I've read this book, and I don't like it. I hate it. In this one, she comes back to, like, possess the body of a young Hispanic girl who dies from a balcony collapsing, and then she's here to make their lives better, this Hispanic community, and it's just, like, so goddamn tasteless. I'm not gonna lie. Like, it's just okay. 2 out of 5 stars. All right, and then this last book is the one that I was talking about that is so bad it's good, and that is The Hand of Cain by Martin Thomas. Stay with me. So we follow this man, Matthew Lodway, and he is one of 3 brothers. There are 3 of them. There's Matthew, Alan, and Timothy. Their father is a doctor, and only one of his sons is a doctor. That's Timothy. Timothy's a doctor. Alan is a musician. He's a violinist in the orchestra, and Matthew is a used car salesman. Matthew is evil, if you couldn't tell by the fact that he's a used car salesman. He's evil, and one day he comes home. He's in love with his brother Alan's fiance. He kills Alan. He murders him. And their father covers this up because it would be terrible for his career if it gets found out that Alan killed Matthew. And also before this, Matthew went to a gypsy palmist, and she made him leave because his hands were just too evil. Stay with me. Later, Timothy and his father, they're the 2 surgeons, the 2 doctors, they're walking along, and Timothy sees this little boy playing with the circular saw. He's just, like, throwing blocks of wood at it. And he's like, this is dangerous. So he goes to like, get the little boy away from the circular saw, and in the process, trips and gets his hands caught in the circular saw. And his dad's like, oh shit, this is my good son that I have left. So I'm going to take the hands off of my evil son and put them on my good son so that my good son can continue doing good work. And Matthew's a used car salesman. He really doesn't need his hands anyway. However, Matthew is understandably upset about this. So as he's sitting there drinking with his prosthetic hands, a Indian Swami midget comes up to him and is like, I can put a curse on your brother for you. And then the good brother, who has the evil hands, now becomes evil and kills so many people. This book is 160 pages long. So much, it's like, somehow, similarly, nothing is happening and everything is happening at the same time. It's beautiful. And I'm going to spoil the ending here, because I don't think anybody's going to read this. At the very end, Timothy and Matthew get in this big fight, like they're physically fighting. Timothy kills Matthew, and then Virgil, the father, comes in with a fucking axe and kills Timothy. Just kills him with an axe. It's beautiful. It is it's fantastic. It is so bad. You have to read it yourself, even though I know nobody will, and I just spoiled the ending. Really knowing the ending, I don't think that would take away from it, because it's just the way that everything comes about is like it's amazing. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. It's so bad. It's good. Currently, I'm reading Sun and Moon, Ice and Snow by Jessica Day George. This is like a fairy tale retelling. She's a Mormon, which is not apparent in her writing, which is good for her, but I just read the back. I guess it doesn't say she's a Mormon, but it says that she studied at Brigham Young University and she lives in Utah, so I guess that might be a stereotype, but am I right? So these are the books I read this past week. That is all for today. I'll talk to you later, and goodbye.